Thank you, Lita. The recording has started.
Super, thank you. Well, good afternoon all, and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Cabinet meeting of the 20th of July 2023. And this is in fact the last meeting of the Cabinet before the summer recess. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. If I could just remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that the recording will be archived for future viewing. All participants should mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback. And any participant wishing to speak should either raise their hand on screen or use the digital hand raising function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues and or maybe to attract the attention of the chair, myself, or the Democratic Services Officer. Today we've actually got quite a full agenda, and we'll be discussing a range of topics, including taking the initial steps towards setting the budget for next year. We'll also be considering references that have come to us from various committees. So without further ado, I shall call up the agenda onto my screen, and we will move on to agenda item 1, which is, first of all, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Sivanyanam, who's unable to join us today, but I can see that everybody else is here. So that's fine. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July 2023. And so can I move those as a true record of that meeting?
And I'll second those.
Thank you. All in agreement, there's no dissension. Agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest, and if there are, the nature of such interests. Do we have any today? I haven't been notified of any.
No declarations formally received, Chair.
Super, thank you. So now we have before we go on to the references that we have, I actually want to make a slight change to the agenda. We have an agenda item 18 from the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and Welsh Language, which is a consultation on proposal to deliver a new building for St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School. And I'd like to bring that further to the front of the agenda, partially because of other commitments for the Cabinet Member, but also in case there's anybody from St Richard Gwyn who would like to hear that proposal. I'm sure that they would share our pleasure at that report. So over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you very much. This report is to advise Cabinet of the governing body of St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School's proposal to undertake a statutory consultation supported by the Sustainable Community for Learning team. The school is currently maintained by the Vale of Glamorgan Local Educational Authority and the Archdiocese of Cardiff. The proposal is to create a new school building at St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School on the existing site at the southwest corner of the school grounds, thus allowing the existing school to remain operational throughout. It will increase the capacity of St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School from 813 places to 1,050 places from September 2025, which equates to 210 pupils in each year group. And this would ensure that St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School is able to make increased demand for school places within the catchment area, would address the condition and suitability issues of the existing buildings. Pupil projections over the next 5 years indicates insufficient capacity to meet future demand for school places at this school. Large-scale housing in the Barry area and across the Vale has impacted upon secondary school demand across all sectors, with increased demand for school places. And in order to meet future demand, an increase in capacity at the school is required to meet parental preference in schooling for the future. And the council considers a 1,050 place building is the minimum size from an efficiency and sustainability perspective. This will provide for 7 form entry school with classes of 30 pupils, an admission number of 210. and a 1,050 place school would accommodate the projected increase in pupil numbers over the years. The establishment of a specialist resource base for 60 pupils will also be developed as part of the consultation to provide additional support with a range of pupils with individual learning needs. Whitmore High School and Poynter High School have successfully introduced SRB units within their school setting, and this is a model that both the council and the governing body would like to introduce at St Richard Gwyn. It is proposed that 60 SRB places will be developed for identified pupils. All pupils attending the SRB will have individual learning plans. They will be supported in a specialist class and will attend mainstream classes in varying amounts of time, alongside whole school activities where appropriate. This is to ensure that all of the pupils are provided with education appropriate to their needs. St Richard Gwyn High School has been included as part of Band B of the Council's Sustainable Communities for Learning capital programme, with the creation of this 1,050 school building scheduled for completion by September 2025. And I'd also like to make the point that, where's my note, that there will be climate change and nature implications here. New build elements of the Sustainable Communities for Learning rolling programme will meet BREEAM excellent rating for significantly reducing the running costs and the carbon emissions arising from the building, as we know is an ambition for the council. Welsh Government announced in November 22 that all new school projects within the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme will be required to meet net zero carbon in operation from January 22 onwards. The council has created the first net zero carbon in operation school building model for the authority and Wales at South Point Primary School in Roos. New building refurbishment elements will adhere to this directive as a minimum, and the programme will develop the model to achieve a fully compliant net zero carbon building. Vale of Glamorgan Council will lead on the consultation of this project. Feedback received throughout the consultation period will be presented to Cabinet for reference, and the governing body will be kept informed of the outcome and will have the ultimate decision. The project was originally planned to be developed through the mutual investment model, which is a revenue funded programme, but after undertaking a cost analysis, it was decided to progress this proposal as a capital scheme. The proposal will result in a smaller development. However, the construction sector has experienced increased costs due to recent global events and inflationary pressures affecting the sector. This has had a significant impact on the costs being received from contractors to develop construction projects. Therefore, although the scheme is smaller in scale, the cost to deliver the scheme are higher for both the mutual investment model and capital funding route, and may be subject to future increases and further increases, which will need to be considered during the design and feasibility phase. Within our current project cost proposal, there has been an inflation sum included for up to the year 2025 to try and mitigate against the overcost for delivery of the project, which I think you'll agree is only practical and sensible. So the recommendations are that Cabinet notes the governing body's decision to undertake a period of consultation from the 5th of September 2023 to the 17th of October 2023 on the proposal to make a regulated alteration to their school to increase the capacity of St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School from 813 places to 1,050 places from September 2025. 2, the Cabinet notes that implementation of the proposal will be subject to the relevant statutory processes, notes that Welsh Government capital funding will be subject to approval of a rigorous business case. And 3, the Cabinet refers this report to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee for consideration as part of the proposed consultation exercise. Are we happy to go with those recommendations?
I would be very happy to second that, and I'm sure that there is much excitement in the school that this proposal is hopefully moving forward, subject to the consultation. It will be the final school in the Vale of Glamorgan, secondary school in the Vale of Glamorgan, that will have a new or substantially upgraded school, and to see a target date of delivery of 2025. It feels within touching distance, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's very gratifying, isn't it?
Really look forward to receiving the results of this consultation when it's complete in October. But really good news, and I would imagine that I hope they haven't quite broken up, because I hope that they get this news today. So yeah, delighted to second. Thank you.
Thank you.
I shall just adjust my agenda so I can get back to the right place. So we're back into the references from other committees. First of all, looking at agenda item 4, that's a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee that relating to the people strategy and supporting documents. Actually, I'm going to move things around slightly again, because there is actually a report on that at item 15. So I would propose to take that at the same time as the full agenda item. So if we can go on to agenda item 5, which is Audit Wales, Vedic Glamorgan Outline Audit Plan 2023. And that's a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 24th of May. Actually, it's interesting that this report actually, first of all, went to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 25th of April. They referred it over to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, who they also had a look at it, and that's now come back to us as a reference. And they are asking, they've referred it to us for our oversight and approval. So Audit Wales is actually the nominated auditor for the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and are required to undertake work in relation to a number of areas, and that would be the audit of finance statements, value for money, continuous improvement, and sustainable the sustainable development principle. And so the attached report actually lays out the outline audit plan for 2023. Both committees have gone through that plan in detail. Both have been completely happy with the outcomes of that. Following comment within the Governance and Audit Committee, there was an assurance that there is an option to explore further areas across the range of audits that are planned during the next year, should that be necessary, and that, also should it be necessary, there could be more on-site audit work if that was needed. So they talk about the responsibilities in respect to the audit of financial statements, etc., and the two thematic reviews that Wales Audit are also doing. They're looking at all 22 councils in some areas in relation to commissioning and contract management and financial sustainability. So both committees had a look at that. Both found it to be a solid outline audit plan, and were happy to endorse it. So I would suggest that for us, our recommendation is that we would also endorse and approve the outline audit plan. So if I could move those as recommendations.
And I'll second those as well.
Excellent. So moving on to agenda item 6. That is another reference from that's also from the Governance and Audit Committee on the 12th of June. And that's the Vale of Glamorgan Council, the application of the Sustainable Development Principle in service areas. And it's just quite interesting that during 2021-22, Audit Wales actually voiced some concerns regarding the council's approach to addressing a proposal for improvement arising from the review of outsourced leisure services. And so there was a subsequent review in the latter half of 2022 to gain further assurance, and the that was felt then to be fine. The report actually attached to Appendix A to this report outlined key findings of the council looking at of Wales Audit looking at the arrangements for ensuring service areas across the council were applying the sustainable development principle. And the key findings were that the council's senior officers, supported by a corporate framework, were helping to drive a positive culture that supported services to apply the sustainable development principle. They also said that there was effective corporate support to help service areas apply the sustainable development, but they felt that there was an opportunity for council to strengthen learning development around that. And the council had mechanisms that helped it to assess whether or not service areas were effectively applying the sustainable development principle and was applying learning to strengthen its arrangements. So they actually made 2 recommendations, and one was that the council should develop its project management toolkit to ensure that those documents helped officers to apply the sustainable development toolkit. To ensure those documents helped officers to apply the sustainable development principle from the outset. And the second one is that the council should develop its learning and development offer to help ensure that staff across the organisation understood the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act at Wales 2015 and were able to apply the sustainable development principle as needed in their roles. So in the committee, the Director of Corporate Resources had said that we developed an action plan which was attached to Appendix B to the report, which would be progressed by the council in line with the council's performance monitoring. So those 2 recommendations are for approval. The double check that. So the report was sent to Cabinet for consideration and approval. And I think that for us, we have considered the reference and the report, and that we approve and agree the 2 recommendations and also the action plan which was set out in Appendix B to the report. And on that basis, I would move.
And I'll second that.
But I'm trying to work this on the. Mark, you put that up. That's great. I'm trying to be really well behaved and do this electronically, and it's proving difficult. I'm juggling 3 screens at the moment, which is proving great. So agenda item 7, and this is another reference from the Governance and Audit Committee of the 12th of June 2023. And this is relating to the Vale of Glamorgan Council annual performance calendar 2023. So if I can just call that up onto my screen. So I said this was discussed in the Governance and Audit Committee, and there were queries around workshops arranged for elected members in relation to the performance calendar, looking at engagement with trade unions, how the council reflected more comprehensively within the self-assessment. And we're in our 2nd year of self-assessment at the moment, and it's noticeable how that is moving forward. Just double checking that I'm getting all the right pages. Looking at as a part of the council's delivery plan, that there would be arrangements, there would be engagement around such areas as the budget setting process. And there was a concern by the chair, Councillor Chapman, that engagement with staff and public and other key stakeholders was scheduled to take place during August, which is when some people are on holiday. And he'd suggested that the length of time for engagement activity planned for August should be extended. So in terms of engagement, the performance calendar will be adjusted to ensure that all those areas could be fully consulted, and also that there was sufficient time to do that. So the recommendations from that committee were that Cabinet be advised of the views of members of the Governance and Audit Committee, and that was that for consideration to be given to extending the public engagement activity scheduled for August 2023 be extended, and that the Council ensures that members of the public feel their views have been heard and responses provided to indicate how those views have been taken into account. And I think we very much take those on board, and consideration will be given if we don't feel that people have had sufficient time. And also we will be mindful that that people feel that their views have been heard, but I think not only heard, but they have been fully considered. And we will be looking to see the responses and how they're delivered to people. So on that note, I think that we would endorse those two and say that actions will be taken to take those forward. And I would move.
And I'll second those.
Great. Thank you. And there's no dissent, so that's great. Agenda item 8 is another reference from Governance and Audit on the 12th of June, and that is the Audit Wales work programme timetable 2022 to 2023, and that was a report that was presented to members. That was the Q4 update of the Audit Wales work programme, and the Governance and Audit Committee reviewed that and noted progress made on the audit work programme as at Q4. Audit Wales advised the committee that work was still ongoing in relation to an audit of grant claims and returns for 2021-22 that was initially due for completion in May, but that's moving forward. There was a query whether Audit Wales would be doing any work as a follow-up to a report published by the UK government related to climate change. And the committee was advised that climate change was one of the key priority areas for Audit Wales, and some initial work had actually already been carried out with further review work expected. So obviously we will be working closely with Audit Wales as in terms of our Project Zero ambitions. So they resolved that the reports of the contents of the report be noted and that it be forwarded to us, to Cabinet for our oversight. And I think that we would do similar, and I would recommend that this report is noted.
And I'll second that.
And moving on, let's have a quick look, get the right one up. Right, agenda item 9, as I said, this is the Project Zero update report. What I intend to do is to actually take agenda item 9 and 10 together, because one is a Project Zero update report from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny. That's on the 20th of June 2023. And agenda item 10 is a Project Zero update report from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny on the 21st of June 2023. and there are comments from both committees, and so they had an update as part of a 6-monthly update that goes to scrutiny committees in terms of work being undertaken. So on the 20th of June, it went to environment regeneration scrutiny, and there was quite a lot of discussion talking about progress of the new Project Zero online hub, planting, support for that would normally be tree planting, support for biodiversity, changes in waste management, the placemaking planning, adoption of the new procurement policy and strategy, because obviously procurement's got a large part to play in reducing our carbon footprint. And the report also looked at performance indicators that had been adopted under Project Zero. So there was discussion about the finances available and the reserves that have been put aside to fund that, and environmental impacts from developments, etc. Quite a bit of discussion around public transport, bus routes, and that is something that remains topical, and we'll be moving forward on that. And in the other committee, hang on, I'm just coming back to that. There are a lot of pages on this to go through. I know there were some interesting comments on corporate performance and resources that I wanted to get to. I'm just I'm going to need to go and look at my paper copy, I'm afraid. Yeah, if you look at agenda item 10, there were discussions about tree planting, about the new transport interchange. There were queries around the impacts of changes to recycling and whether or not there was any data at the moment, which obviously we're still working that together. There was also a comment about the carbon footprint of staff working from home and whether or not there was a greater carbon footprint there, but it was explained that actually not travelling has a huge impact, because transport or travel is one of the largest areas of carbon impact. So some quite interesting conversations on there. And also some discussion about circular economy principles, which I think hopefully we will be taking forward in our consideration of this area. So really interesting discussion, and it's worth having a full read of both reports. But I think on that, it's just for us to note agenda items 9 and agenda items 10, and to thank the committees for their in-depth discussion of the topic. So happy to move on that point.
And I'll second that as well.
Thank you. We then move on to agenda item 11, and that was due to be a reference on the revised multi-location meetings policy from the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee. There was a tremendous amount of discussion in that committee with a number of recommendations that were being sent forward, but they have some quite complex implications for the way in which we run meetings in the future. So I have decided that we will hold that report over until we come back in September, where we can have a full discussion of all the implications before we take a final decision. This report went to scrutiny first, and we obviously need to have more consideration of that area. So that one, agenda item 11, will be deferred. Into agenda item 12 is a report of the Joint Consultative Forum, and that is conversations between representatives of trade unions and elected members. And they have updates of directorate consultative groups as well, because we work very closely with our union colleagues across various directorates, so they might have conversations about specific directorate issues as well as broader corporate issues. So they received the feedbacks or minutes from Visible Service and Housing Trade Union, Social Services Consultative Forum, etc. There was also a presentation from relating to Stop Loan Sharks Wales, which was from the client liaison officer from Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit, and that was felt to be very informative, with a lot of discussion on that. They also discussed, as we will later, they discussed the people strategy and supporting document, and there was discussion that actually, although we've got complexity of the organisation, that there was widespread support for the people strategy and the supporting documents. They also looked at culture engagement and involvement going on. One thing that's quite interesting is the new induction process that's been adopted, and that's the Welcome to the Vale. And I know that our directors, the chief executive and myself, all participate in sessions with staff to make sure that hopefully that they feel at home right from the start of their employment. And we take questions. No questions are barred, and there have been some really interesting ones. I think the most challenging was, what would you do if somebody gave you £50 million with no strings and you weren't allowed to say go on holiday? But those conversations have been really interesting and worthwhile. I think the next one is next week, so look forward to it. Then our disability network and an update on the Oracle Fusion project as well. So an interesting meeting, and I would move that we note the minutes.
And I'll second those.
Thank you. Agenda item 13, that's the report of the corporate parenting panel. And as we have the chair of that in Cabinet, I pass over to Councillor Eddie Williams.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, we've had the report. You see the minutes of the panel. I'd just like to talk about the items on the agenda, and it was item 4 in particular was the appreciative inquiry exploring progress and development of a virtual school model in relation to our children looked after. And this was a really interesting project that's been undertaken by members in the Education Directorate as part of the development, but also to look at development on how it improves the experiences of our looked after children in the schools. And you can see that within the report, it talks about was a collaboration between the Vale Glamorgan, Leith Talbot, Flintshire Council to explore that sort of progress and set up what they call a virtual school model. And within that, it was talking about their attendance and their progress, and recognising some of the factors that affect particularly the children looked after and how the schools respond to that. And it was really useful how we previously to this inquiry that some of that information was very difficult to get hold of. There were timescales that the information wasn't immediate. However, the development of this project enabled that to happen to centralise it, so the linking between education and the social care directorates, and it was a really useful project that has got the highlight of the Welsh Government, and they're hoping to pass that round all the authorities in Wales. Martin Cole is our officer that was dealing with this, and she gave a bit of the context and the background to our children looked after, and it was interesting that and also Sharon Cox was one of the teachers from Clanton Major School, which gave us sort of an insight into what has been achieved, and recognising also that the children looked after are trauma, and they do have some trauma in context, additional support needs, and the recognition that the teachers themselves were able, from training and recognising their needs, could understand better how to support vulnerable children within the schools. There was an excellent presentation, and I say the model is going to be further developed across Wales. The other aspect that was on there was the actual breakdown of looked after children, and it's important to recognise that we have an increase in the number of children looked after, and the numbers, we're talking 322 at the time of the report, and 147 in the female and 177 male, and it's just, when you look at the various stages of where they're in the processes of being supported, it's quite clear that there's a high demand, particularly after the recent few years. So it was a really useful report, and the panel obviously take responsibility on behalf of all members and the authority to make sure that we're looking after our children in the best way possible. And that's a quick update on that. I can answer further questions at any time, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. No, I think it's a comprehensive update on that. It's very helpful. And I've been out and about quite a bit recently, and I actually went to visit one of our primary schools. Always a joy to visit Barry Island Primary School. But while we were there, we were actually talking about the challenges of supporting young people with additional learning needs in our mainstream schools, because if it's at all possible, that's where children should be with other children from their home community. But it doesn't take away the huge pressures that places on the organisation to do that. So absolute hats off to people that are supporting children with additional needs. No, thank you. So therefore, I don't think you moved that we note, so I'll do that. And I don't know if you want to come back in and second it.
Of course, Leader.
Wonderful, thank you. And Gwyn's got his thumb up, so that's great. So going on to my own reports, agenda item 14 is the use of the Chief Executive's emergency powers, and these are basically the use of emergency powers since the 8th of June. And as we know, there are procedures that we can use to approve certain decisions when relevant people have been consulted. Normally that would apply to, putting in place maintenance work, as is in the case of quite a few of these, once the actual tenders, etc., have already formally been agreed. And also the accepting grants from outside organisations, so that we can get on and deliver the work that was associated with those grants. So things like school maintenance is a typical one at this time of year, where there will be a bustle of activity in our schools to do maintenance while the children are on summer holidays. So this report is in effect for noting, unless anyone's got any comments. Gwyn, I can see that your hands are up. your hand is up.
Yes, Leader, just to mention, on page 5, it mentions tennis court management at Penarth Athletic Field. I just wanted to say that this is continuing the excellent support we've had with and the collaboration with Tennis Wales. We're now following on from Romley Schools last year, where at the Romley Park site we had a new tennis court. This year we've got another 4. So basically, the 2 in Penarth, we followed on with 1 at Wenvo and 1 at Millwood. So that's add up to 5 that we've got in working with Tennis Wales, which is one of the best results from across Wales. So we've got 5 of these courts come into the Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn. So are you happy to second that then?
I am very happy.
Super, thank you. And the rest of us are all in agreement then. Find the next item. So that is agenda item. Just move that over. That's the people strategy and supporting documents. If I can fully reference up at the same time. This is so I think as we mentioned when this came to us before, that the previous HR strategy expired in 2020 during the course of the pandemic, and although there has been a delay in developing a revised strategy, it's unfortunate. It has been a good opportunity to reflect on how things have changed as a result of COVID-19. Also to review the market position, because in terms of the wider economic climate, that's had quite a marked effect both on the council, its staff, and also our wider communities. So this strategy, while it's complex, enables us to set a clear vision and direction for all people related to activity across the council. It aligns with Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. It makes a clear statement about how the council values and treats its staff, and also the culture that we wish to foster. It outlines how we will seek to provide everyone with a supportive and nurturing working environment so that we can achieve our aim, our vision, which is the title of our overall plan of working together for a brighter future. The strategy has a number of supporting documents. That's the workforce implementation plan, the hybrid strategy, volunteer policy. They were all, as I said, brought to Cabinet back in February 2023 with a proposal for a 6-week period of consultation. This went to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee at the end of April. And we actually agreed to extend the consultation slightly in order to make it as wide-ranging as possible. So the consultation has now concluded. We've had a multifaceted approach, wider dissemination of information, discussions at a whole range of fora, whether that be with heads of service, liaison with trade unions, as we've just heard, presenting it via the Joint Consultative Forum, the Change Forum as well, staff groups, as well as a staff survey and communications via StaffNet. So for us today, we're asked to review the consultation feedback and approve the people strategy and wider supporting documents as described in this report and appendix. The people strategy, the appendix 1, if you look at it, focused on 3 key themes, and that was redesigning for responsiveness, driving employee experience, and striving for high performance. Each of the themes are included in the implementation plan, which is at appendix 2, and that sets out a whole range of actions and outputs. The hybrid working strategy is appendix 3, and with associated management guidance at appendix 3A. Then we've got the volunteering policy at appendix 4 that provides all staff members, with the exception of chief officer grades, who will be able to participate. Chief officers can participate, but they would be expected to take annual leave in terms of volunteering. But we've already seen really positive outcomes of when staff volunteer in our communities. There's the organisational development and learning framework, that's appendix 5, and that sets out a clear framework for learning activity. And the consultation of the draft strategy is laid out in paragraph 2.9. Let's get to the end of this. I've just got to get to the consultation feedback is included at appendix 6, and there is also a section on where we actually can look at feedback, totally openly, of people who disagreed or strongly agreed. Some people who thought that things were missing, and there were things like there were 6 that were related to sort of pay, workload, recruitment pressures, that sort of thing. Some people had concerns about hybrid working. Some people asked whether or not the council would review a 4-day working week. Whole range of different areas which have all been discussed in terms of the feedback. So in terms of changing the document, we've looked at ensuring all our documents have front pages and summary documents that show a diverse workforce, reviewed our workforce implementation plan to further draw on activities around reward and benefit, reviewed our workforce implementation plan to enhance activities and outputs around recruitment and retention, strengthened our dashboards to draw out greater data around retention, exit interviews and diversity, and enhanced the documents to draw closer links to recruitment and our commitment in relation to armed forces. So we have the consultation document outcomes and what we've done as a result of that. The feedback, if I can go back to agenda item 4. There were queries over staff performance, and that was explained in terms of 360-degree reviews, etc. There were discussions on this, as well as the Project Zero report on hybrid working and its carbon impact. But I think that was dealt with both there and in the Project Zero update. There was discussion of the need to have flexibility, both from a carbon perspective, but also in terms of recruitment and retention of staff. It's quite important these days. Has felt that the youth service should be engaged and that was looked into, and also in terms of staff data and updates on the staff learning framework. So I think that we can note the feedback from or the reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Committee, and the references, the recommendations that are before us today on this report. We have 5 recommendations, and that's that Cabinet notes the content of the updated people strategy, that's Appendix 1, and supporting documents Appendices 2, 3, 4 and 5, in addition to the consultation feedback, which is at Appendix 6. 2, that Cabinet endorses and improves the revised people strategy and supporting documents following consultation as described in the report and appendices. And 3, that Cabinet receives an update on the progress made as part of the quarterly performance reports and in standalone reports as necessary. 4, that the strategy be reviewed regularly and delegated authority is given to the head of human resources and organisation development in consultation with leader and director of corporate resources to make any required updates with material changes reported to Cabinet. And finally, point 5, or recommendation 5, that Cabinet refers to the volunteering policy attached at Appendix 4 to this report to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee for their information and to discuss the potential opportunities to work collaboratively on this scheme. I think it's a lot of good work gone on here, so I am very, very happy to move.
I'll second those.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
you.
Councillor
Thank you,
Williams
Leader.
has got his hand up.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
Leader,
I missed
is it
that.
Okay for me to come in?
Yes, of course, Eddie.
I try and keep my quiet, but this is a particular document that I fully support. You've mentioned many of those areas, and it's the impact it has on the staff and the public as a result of that. It's just one of those. It's laid out in such a way that it's easy to read. It's not lost on me. It's a large document, but those discussions that the items that you've covered off, the hybrid working, flexibility, volunteering. I mean, they're real benefits and concerns that you'd want to be able to address across the council. And it's great to see that we've got a positive, constructive way of dealing with staff and providing them with such an excellent learning strategy, developing them through succession planning. And for me, even in this process of talking through this document, we've discussed as a director the impact on recruitment, for example, and we've improved filling in some posts within the social care directorate as a result of making some changes to the development of both succession planning and growing our own and bringing in some younger people to deal with our workload. And what I'd also like to point out as Armed Force champion, the recognition that you mentioned the Armed Forces Covenant, and there's the recognition within the document. It's not just something we put it, we put on the sideline. It's embedded in the document, and it's good to see that we've got actions. Staff get training on the Covenant, and also it's part of our business that with any veterans or serving people that come into the Vale, we're there to support them. So I just wanted to commend the staff who've worked on this particular document. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. And those are the points very, very well made. And it's interesting that actually staff do take note of this. It is hugely important, not only that we value our staff, which we do, but we are seen to, and we're seen to demonstrate that in the policies that we put into place. And it's interesting that I saw, there was one piece of feedback that that talked about whether or not we'd be prepared to look at a 4-day week. Well, do you know, actually, we try to be as flexible as we can, don't we? That we need to meet we obviously need to meet our business needs, but if we can meet our business needs plus be flexible with our staff, so that we have staff working 4-day weeks. You know, we can do job shares, we can do all sorts of things, because we value our people, and we want the very best people working in the Vale of Glamorgan. So it was actually quite interesting to hear that question being asked, when you think, well, why wouldn't we? I can remember a couple of years ago somebody saying, well, am I able to sort of work from home occasionally because I've got caring commitments? And it said, well, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we consider that? It was pre-pandemic. And as an organisation, we try to be enabling. We try to support our staff to be the best they can. So no, thank you for raising that, and thank you to our staff for pulling this strategy together. Super. Right, agenda item 16. It doesn't seem that long since we did the budget, does it? And in fact, it wasn't that long. But we felt that with the pressures that are ahead of us again this year, that this is a process that needs to start even earlier, so that we can get, you know, a full handle. But not only that we have got the time to be as open and transparent about the budget, about what we're facing, and about how we intend to manage this going forward. And so this report, the financial strategy for 2024-25, the purpose of it is to review the financial pressures over the medium term. So this is not just for this year, but actually looking at what might be coming ahead, and to put in place a strategy for delivering next year's budget, and also have sustainable finances over the medium term. So in essence, the report revisits the medium-term financial plan assumptions. You know, what were the underpinning assumptions that we agreed back in March 2023, and it sets out what are the new and emerging financial issues. It looks at the you know, therefore, that what the strategy is and the process that we'll be using to approve the budget for next year, the 2024-25 budget, and the medium-term financial plan, which we'll be looking at coming to in March next year. So going back to a long time ago, in 2020, the council agreed its then new corporate plan, and that which is called Working Together for a Brighter Future. And now the council is developing is delivering the current annual development plan and working alongside next year's annual delivery plan. We're developing that, which is all working alongside the 2023-24 budget. Across the autumn, we'll be commencing development of the new corporate strategy, and this too will have to align with the budget. So our financial strategy will focus on ensuring that the council resources will be targeted to delivering the council's objectives. So whatever we've set out to do in the corporate plan, which translates into the annual delivery plan, that is what we focus on delivering. And also we have to say that within these challenging times, we will be ensuring that services to our most vulnerable are maintained. So looking ahead to next year, there's a significant funding gap in 2024-25, and also across the medium term. It's not as dramatic as it was last year, or it's looking not to be as dramatic as we faced when we were looking at the financial strategy last year. But the gap for next year is forecast currently at 6.43 million, and there are forecast cost pressures of just over 17 million. It's looking, if we look at where we get our funding from, it's looking that we would only be getting an additional sort of about 10.59 million coming through our Welsh Government grant, our council tax and planned use of council reserves. The major factor in those cost pressures is inflation, and with nearly 11 million, about 10.9 million of pressure coming through. That's things like pay awards, energy costs, care and transport costs, as the UK as a whole is facing persistent rising prices in the economy. And we heard this week that inflation rates have dropped slightly, but they are still quite sizable inflation rates when you consider that a target is about 2% and we're still around 7%. We had a 2-year settlement announcement from Welsh Government in March 2023. And so we've got an indicative aggregate external finance, basically that's Welsh Government funding for us, the AEF, increase of 3% for 2024-25, and signalling growth of only 1% a year afterwards. So indications currently suggest that there wouldn't be an expectation of any improvement in the indicative settlement for 2024-25. There's very little that's coming down from the UK government to Wales, and so therefore from there to us. Wyn, I can see you've got your hand up now. Do you want to come in now or later?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention actually, Leader, that I think it's an excellent report, and I'd like to thank Matt for making it so easy to read and bring to our attentions the challenges ahead. You're quite correct. It doesn't seem long since we just discussed the budget, but now we're coming up to end of July and here we go again. So thank you, Matt. This is a very, very good report, and the following report as well, which Liz will obviously deal with very soon. Thanks very much.
Right, I'll just get through the end of this. So when we're putting these figures together, you will see that there's an assumed increase of 3.9%, but we tend to do that for planning purposes, and what that will end up as will be subject to a policy decision later. This will be sent to scrutiny committees, and they'll be asked to review the financial strategy over the summer, because it might be recessed, but we will be continuing to work on this. Officers will be reviewing the cost pressures, and that will take place over the summer and early autumn. There's an investment side to cost pressures. These are things that we would want to be doing. That's where we would like to be delivering improved services across a range of areas, but that is a choice. Can we afford that? The inflationary and demographic pressures, such as how costs are rising, or if we've got more people with particular needs within the council area, those are pretty well unavoidable. So so the headline sort of gap in funding, if you take investment out, if we don't invest in new things, is about 4.9 million. So services will bring the savings proposals forward across October and November against an agreed framework. Those will be subject to internal challenge in mid and late November. and there'll be active public participation on these proposals when they've been suitably developed. So we will be bringing those forward, and we will be communicating them. In parallel with work on the savings proposals for the current financial year, officers will be developing the next iteration of the council's transformational change programme, and that's reshaping. And that's where we have a serious look at, if we do things differently, can we either be more effective for the same money, or can we save money? This report actually sets out the framework for developing the programme, and its interaction with the sort of whether we adopt a business as usual or a tactical savings approach. And in honesty, we have to look at a whole range of factors, as we did this year. You know, what do we save? What do we invest in? Where do we use reserves? So there'll be a refresh of the cost and funding assumption during the Chancellor's budget in October, November. I think that's when most of us are sort of glued to the screen to find out where funding is coming from. And a budget for consultation will come forward in January 2024, won't it? I think there's a typo there, which will be subject to scrutiny by all of the council scrutiny committees, as well as consultation with the public. And it would be really good to have some in-depth and robust conversations on that. So once we've gone through all this process, a balanced budget, how we intend to achieve a balanced budget, will be presented to council in March 2024. There are a whole range of contributory factors in terms of how it fits with the corporate plan, the financial strategy, sustainable finances and how we're going to achieve that, appropriate levels of reserves, how sort of Bank of England base rates, inflation, etc., all contributes, and that is all in the report. And as this report is going to scrutiny committees, I wouldn't intend to go into that in depth today, but there will be full discussion of it in scrutiny. So we've got 6 recommendations before us on this report. And that's firstly that Cabinet is recommended to note the challenging financial position faced by the council, with a funding gap of 6.43 million in 2024-25 and 11.953 million across the medium term. Secondly, that Cabinet is recommended to lobby Welsh Government for an appropriate settlement in the face of the continued inflationary pressures being experienced, and to authorise council officers to do the same through appropriate networks. I think that's ongoing. I think it has to be said. 3, that Cabinet is recommended to request officers to review the cost pressures and bring back savings proposals to address the budget gap in order for the council to be in a position to set a balanced budget in March 2024. 4, Cabinet is recommended to request officers to develop proposals for a redefined transformation programme, the reshaping programme, to complement the financial strategy and contribute to the medium financial sustainability of the council. 5, Cabinet is recommended to refer this report to all of the council's scrutiny committees and for committees to review the financial strategy, including the proposed approach to defining and developing the next iteration of the reshaping programme, and assumptions made on costs and funding in the medium-term financial plan refresh, and for comments to be referred back to Cabinet for consideration. I very much look forward to attending those scrutiny committees and to hearing the outcomes of it. And finally, that Cabinet is recommended to note that a further report on the council's budget be presented to Cabinet in due course, as outlined in this report. And I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwyn, for your kind words, and I would support that and thank our finance team for their work on this. moving on to the next report. Which is the draft capital strategy for 2024-25 and the initial capital programme proposals for 2024-25 up to 2028-29. So the report is in essence the council's proposed draft strategy for next year, and that's at Appendix 1, and also at Appendix 2, the current 5-year capital programme for the period as stated 2024-25 to 2028-29. The strategy looks at a longer term view of the council's capital investment requirements, and it also outlines the various strategies which we would use to identify the priority areas for capital investment, and the external factors that result in the need to for capital expenditure. Capital resources, so the available capital resources, are difficult to predict over a long period, as the level of general capital funding provided by Welsh Government is usually advised on a year-by-year basis. So to try and set a sort of 5-year plan can be a bit of a challenge. The priority areas of spend, which influence the provision of specific grants, will also change over a period of time. Capital receipts can be difficult to predict, particularly given the current economic climate, which gives a level of uncertainty. Last year, or earlier this year, sorry, on 28th of February 2023, Welsh Government announced the final general capital funding settlement, which was 6.997 million, being made up of 3.54 million grant and 3.452 million of supported borrowing. And that's an increase of 1.168 million from the previous year's funding of 5.829 million. It's been confirmed by Welsh Government that the general capital funding will remain at the same level for 2024-25, with no further projections beyond this point. And so the council's also waiting for further information from Welsh Government in relation to the £20 million capital for decarbonisation, which was confirmed in the final settlement. A summary of the 5-year capital programme and how it's funded is given in the report. The total value of capital schemes over the next 5 years is anticipated to be 286.370 million, and that would include just over 10 million for Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, just over 74 million for 2 learning and skills pipeline projects, and you know, you'd obviously have just seen St Richard Gwyn there. 146.996 million for the housing improvement programme, and 12 million for non-treasury investment strategy, subject to approval of schemes going forward. But we need to be mindful of what might be coming along. The funding table actually also looks at the borrowing required to implement the programme, which is sort of 130.287 million, of which 85 million, just over 85 million, is in relation to the housing improvement programme. The council's currently developing a non-treasury investment strategy, and this is intended to address opportunities identified in the council's recovery strategy to support innovative businesses and economic regeneration, but also to increase capital programme investment and focus on green jobs and green infrastructure. The fund for investment totals 12 million, with 200,000 earmarked for feasibility and due diligence costs, and the initial costs associated with specialist non-treasury investment advice. The split of schemes are going to be brought to Cabinet later once known, and it's requested to increase the 2024-25 to 2028 29 capital programme by 12 million as profiled in the report. I'm just going to go on to next steps. Mark, did you want to come in now, or do you?
I'm just happy to come in now, if that's okay, Leader.
Yes, if you want to come in now before I do next steps.
Yeah, it's fine. I've just to make a couple of points, really. I mean, this investment is really quite crucial in my area in some ways, because one of the areas that I am control of is not just neighbourhood services, but also building services as well. So obviously in those sort of areas where we are developing capital schemes, it's really what we call an invest to save. We're actually investing significant money in developing new buildings and new infrastructure. And the whole point of doing that is that in the future, we're going to save money on things on repairs and maintenance. And really, that's one of the areas that I'm responsible for. And actually will reduce in future the cost pressures upon that part of the service that I operate in. So I think it is vital, that we pursue this. We have an excellent reputation for pursuing capital works. And can I also, I know Councillor John thanked the officers in the previous report. I also like to thank the officers in this report as well. And there's so many people involved in this, and not just people that obviously design the projects, but also execute them as well in the future. So I like to thank those.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I think that's very well said. And I was observing a scrutiny yesterday when they were looking at the capital outturn, and the amount that we managed to deliver last year against some quite difficult circumstances was quite stunning. So hopefully we can do the same next year. So our next steps are, in fact, that capital bids will be invited for return in September of this year. So we'll get sort of a full idea of what we would like to do. But then those bids will be evaluated by the Strategic Insight Board in October, where we start to look at what we can do. Each scrutiny committee will be asked to first consider the initial capital programme proposals that are included in Appendix 2 and to consider the submitted capital bids. If changes are requested or specific bids are supported, then the reasons need to be recorded so that Cabinet and the budget working group can draw up the final proposals. Yeah, I think we know there's only a finite amount of money, and if you want to put something else in, then we've got to actually prioritise what gets taken out. Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee will consider both the initial capital budget proposals and any recommendations that other scrutiny committees have made. So it will be filtered through them. The responses of scrutiny committees are referred to Corporate Performance Resources Scrutiny Committee in November. Senior officers then will be reviewing and prioritising the bids as part of the programme of work to balance the budget, and the council is working to balance the revenue budget, as we've just heard, for 2024-25, because it's actually remain quite a lot of very large challenges due to the current economic climate and the cost of living crisis. We're also reviewing significant cost pressures. The level of accepted borrowing will be dependent on the resources that are available within the revenue budget, because if you're borrowing money, you've got to be able to pay sort of interest charges and pay it back. So no further unsupported borrowing will be added to the capital programme until January, until we know whether or not we can afford it. The Treasury Management mid-year report is due to be taken to Cabinet in November 2023. The Treasury Management strategy will be updated to reflect the budget proposals, and that will be reported to Audit Committee, Cabinet and Council before the 11th of March 2024 deadline. So there will be a lot of reports going back and forth between Cabinet, between scrutiny. There'll be internal discussions before we ultimately come forward in March with final proposals. But hopefully during that time, everyone will have an opportunity to have input and to understand the background to the proposals, why the decisions have been made, and the justifications for those decisions. I'm quite pleased this year that some of the changes that we made to reports in terms of capital proposals have proved to increase the transparency and openness of those reports, and I look forward to doing that again this year. So in terms of recommendations on this report, the first one, there are three before us, and the first one is that Cabinet approve the draft capital strategy 2024-2025 as set out in Appendix 1, that the initial capital programme for 2024-25 to 2028-29 is noted by Cabinet and referred to scrutiny committees for consultation. And finally, to include the non-treasury investment strategy scheme as a pipeline scheme within the 2024-25 to 2028-29 capital programme with a budget of 12 million as detailed in the report. And I would move.
And I'll second those.
Thank you. And Gwyn's got his, Mark's already said that he's in support, so we're okay on that one. So next, if we hadn't moved, it would have been agenda item 18. That would have been the consultation on the new building for St Richard Gwyn, but we have already covered that. So we're now on to actually what I find is a really, really interesting report. And this is over to Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services with a revised highway maintenance 3-year plan for 2022 to 2024. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Can I also say this has been a very thorough meeting. We can show you how busy we are on item 19 on the agenda, and that just shows you. It also shows you the plethora of things that we discuss. So this is one of the things that I know that many residents of Vale Glamorgan are very interested in, and that's our resurfacing plan. Now, obviously, resurfacing plan involves sort of 3 areas of what we resurface in terms of looking at roads in particular. Now, we dress roads in different ways. We often can use what we call surface dressing, which is one way of doing it, and that hopefully would sort of like protect the internal structure of the roads to stop it further deteriorating. And this is an area where we will spend some money of our capital on this. The other area, which is the major area, is actually the road structure itself, which is what we call our full surface. So we will go into the substructure and repair that if needed. And the third area, which was in terms of this third area of this, is footways as well. So I'm going to move on to the actual detail of it now. Now, obviously, in terms of appendices, we have what we call Appendix A and Appendix B. Now, Appendix A is basically a big structure, a big spreadsheet of all the roads that we have resurfaced and that we will hopefully resurface in the future. Now, in order for those roads to qualify to be resurfaced, they need a score of what we call 210 out of 400. And the item of scoring is identified in Appendix B. Now, Appendix B goes through various different categories. Now, the maximum any score any road can get is 400. All right, and that includes up to 30 points for road classification. So obviously, the busy roads, what we call the A roads, are given a score of 30. The less important roads, the unclassified, is scored 15. We also do a scanner survey data on that. And obviously, we get our engineers and our technical people to go around scanning the road servicing. And obviously, roads which in the highest category can get up to a score of 50. Those which are yellow are 30, and those which have no real issues are given no score at all. We also do a visual assessment, and we have various categories going up to no defects, which obviously score 0, up to unserviceable, which means basically you can't really use the road, up to 80. And then we have what we call an engineer's assessment that's also up to 80. We also look at third-party claims as well. So obviously, if people make a claim because something's happened to their vehicle or whatever, then obviously 3 or more claims will score 30. Obviously people made any points to unveil about their roads. Again, that's up to 30 as well. Everything on the bus route gets 20, and obviously maintenance costs. Anything that will cost us over £3,000 and things like potholes, for example, and that would be 80. So what I want to assure everyone here is that we have very much an objective criteria when assessing roads and conditions. Now, although we have a list, the list is not definitive. If you want to add another road to the list, please let us know. And I mean residents by that, or even members of the council, please let us know, and we'll get our engineers to inspect those roads and to see what we could do. Now, obviously, we only have so much financial resources out there, but obviously we want to go a long way as much as possible, which is why we got an additional amount of money this year, because we were fortunate when we had the outturn of the financial accounts. We had a little underspend, and that meant that we could generate an additional £300,000 to asphalt resurfacing, micro asphalt servicing, and that's a really good use of money, because that money goes quite a long way in terms of those streets that have been identified in Appendix A. I would also like to, before I get to the recommendations, I like to go through some of the reasons why we do this. Now, obviously, what we want to do is trying to stop further deterioration of roads. We also have a legal responsibility to make sure that the roads are in good condition. And we also want to make sure that we also take into account the users of roads. And one of the things that we're obviously very keen to promote is active travel. And we want to ensure that not just the main structure of the roads, but also the roads nearest to the pavement is a good structure, because sometimes that can cause issues as well. And going forward, we will look at the criteria to look into active travel. Now, the other things I also want to point out to you is that when we do have obviously issues with certain roads, that we will obviously be flexible in the way that we allocate the money as much as possible. So if you do find there is a road, please let us know. Okay. I've also now come over to what we call the resources and legal considerations, which are identified on page 7 of the report. This identifies the amount of money that we're going to spend on this. So in 5.1, for example, we got 1.25 million in a capital programme, and we had slight slippage of £135,000, and that means we have a total of 1.385 million for resurfacing this year. We also got an additional, and I need to correct what I said earlier, £350,000 for utilised for micro asphalt treatment, and in addition, there's an extra £200,000 for footway repairs. And in addition to that, we hope to spend £971,000 for carriage repairs, which are largely repairing potholes for 23-24. Now, we need to achieve what we call a steady state, to maintain it as it was previously, £2.1 million, and that, I think, fulfills that criteria. Now, obviously, that's the league. We also have legal, as I said before, we have a duty under the Highways Act to maintain buildings in terms of Highways Act 1980. And now I'll go to the recommendations now on this report. Right. So the first recommendation, that the Cabinet notes the contents of the revised highways maintenance 3-year resurfacing plan for 22-24. And remember, we're now in starting year 2 now. We've already done, if you look at Appendix A, considerable amounts of work on this already, as attached to Appendix A, and he agrees in principle additional priority locations for resurfacing. As I mentioned, scoring is over 210 are the priorities. that the Director of Environment and Housing be granted delegated authority to amend the plan in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services if urgent highways resurfacing projects, as I said earlier. One, that this matter is referred to Environmental and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for consideration. So I'd be grateful for the impact of that scrutiny members for any suggestions they'd like to make. Number 4, that subject to no comments that it will affect the plan as proposed being received from the Scrutiny Committee, the Highway Maintenance 3-year resurfacing plan for 22-24 be agreed. That in future years, the criteria for road scoring are reviewed to better consider issues such as active travel and other routes that may well be used by cyclists. And number 6, that only essential parts of the affected highway are identified for officers of resurface when necessary. This to ensure that we don't, when we resurface a road, we only ensure that we resurface the bits that are needed, not necessarily the whole road. And that will explain that certain roads, for example, are resurfacing part of it, not all of it. But that's a good reason, because that ensures, you know, good value for money. And we got to also be careful that it's the council taxpayer makes a considerable contribution to our revenue budget, and we got to take that as a specific interest. So I like to so move.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm absolutely delighted to second that. It's good that we've been able to find that, because it's not just, as you point out, it's not just capital finance, it's also revenue finance in terms of potholes. It's good news in terms of looking to include a criteria in terms of active travel, that we're trying to move forward on that. And I think it's good to note that since we had some horrendous weather in the winter, the teams have made amazing progress in dealing with issues on the roads. And I think our thanks have to go to them as well.
I thank you very much, Leader, on that. And I totally agree with you. My team of officers and operatives have been working really hard in very difficult circumstances this year. So I'll pass on your thanks to them as well.
Super. So on that note, everyone's in agreement. I think we're all very happy to agree that report, and we'll move on to our final report for today. And this is the for the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health. It's the joint area plan, and so it's over to Eddie to explain. Thank you.
Lena. Thank you. As I say, it's a joint area plan between the Regional Partnership Board, which is a partnership of Vale, Cardiff local authorities and the health boards, and third sector and voluntary organisations. So this plan sets out, which is based on a regional populations assessment, identifies the sort of needs and require, you know, what support that we need to provide. It's over a 5-year plan, and it covers over the amount of level and the range of services and support. And also, as I go through this, you'll note that it includes carers. The lead partner is the Vale of Glamorgan, and if I just stick to the report rather than go off piste, it's been developed, and if you look at the actual plan itself, there's useful graphics there on the sort of layout, the structure of the boards and the partners, and that's really useful to look at. The plan was actually presented to scrutiny on the 13th of June by Kat Doman, who's the director, and based along with Meredith Gardner, and there's a considerable amount of work, as you can see, that's gone into this. It's the scrutiny has several questions, and so the reason I mentioned scrutiny is because it's available online for people to see that presentation, so that's reason why I mentioned that clearly. Scrutiny came back with, having looked at the report, the plan, sorry, that we need to ensure that young carers are featured as part of the carers element, and it's recognised that that's been a focus as part of this plan to include carers, because, as I mentioned, it's the voluntary third sector and those that provide the support which we don't really cost out, but without them, then we'd end up not providing for the needs of the population. There was a mention about police services, but that's an area which we know is covered off by the Public Sector Board, and so interesting enough, this plan overlaps the Public Sector Board partners as well. So some of the areas, like for example, the violence against women and domestic abuse is covered off by the partnership board, but it's included in this plan as well. If you look at the report, the background, you'll see that it lists the actions to be taken and how they're going to be procured, and how the partners will work together to deal with their action plans. If you look at 1.2, you'll see the sort of what the assessment report looked at, a range of from children, young people, adults, and you can see there it mentions about health and physical disabilities. Also, mental health is a key feature, as is sensory impairment. And also we looked at the carers who need support. The actual plan came together because it was several workshops. There's several hundred people involved in this partnership, and there's over 40 people within the Vale of Glamorgan itself who are actually involved in this. If you look at let's see, 1.5, it's this plan will need to be endorsed by the local authorities, so that's why it's gone through a scrutiny process. It's come to Cabinet for its approval and endorsement, and then you can see in paragraph 2.2 what those commitments are. What is it the plan is trying to do, and you can see the things such as making sure that we work together. It's key that as an authority we've got responsibilities, but then health have got those, and we're talking about the same individuals, so let's work together and make sure that we don't duplicate or even miss out, because that's one of the key elements, isn't it? That we want to make sure that it's structured, it's linked, and that's been, particularly for me, has been one of the challenges in identifying the data and the support. We've had examples where people in the community have gone into hospital and then ended up with additional needs and requirements because they haven't been able to come out. So those are areas that this plan looks at. And interestingly, one of the initiatives that we introduced this last year was a fall service, introducing St John's Ambulance, which prevents the number of people going into the hospitals, which then reduces the stresses on the hospital service, and that's been really successful. We've been able to keep people at home. You know, it's the St John's Ambulance have been triaging, and not needing for people to go into the hospital, and as I say, that's been really successful. There are other unpaid carers, a key feature. They've got a profile. We've now got some representatives that represent the unpaid carers, and it's interesting. The two people that we got are really dynamic. They've lived experience of unpaid carers and have contributed quite a considerable amount to this plan, and will be making a difference. So it's something that is planned in the coming 5 years that we'll be doing. One of the key areas, learning disabilities, that's featuring quite high. There's a recognition that we do need to do more, but and also mental health, as we know, is another key area. For me, I'd be looking at neurodiversity. We know there's quite a bit looked at for adults, but we're looking for younger people. There'll be another focus that will come through. You'll notice when you look at the actual plan, page 8 covers the sort of structure, but also covers the themes, and it's real simple. For me, it's an easy to read report and enables us to look at the themes being starting well, living well, and aging well. And you can see within this document, it's the actual projects that are going to be focused on in the next 5 years. If I just go straight to the recommendations, I would ask that the Cabinet notes the consideration of the joint area plan by the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee, and that the Cabinet approves the joint area plan as appended to this report. I so move, Leader.
Thank you, Eddie. I've seen this report in sort of various fora, and I've actually been really, really pleased with the way that this has come together. And for me, it gives those people affected by the different areas of this report a voice. Because if you actually have a look at the section where it lays out what they are intending to do, say their commitment to unpaid carers, or their commitment to people with dementia, you can look at that, and sometimes it helps you to see what things would help you. And you're then able to have that conversation with the service providers. But, you know, you might say, well, I can't sit on a phone for an hour in the morning, because actually my caring needs mean that I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Now, my experience is that quite often care providers, or, you know, whatever, will say, right, didn't realise that. We will put, you know, we can work around that. And to have something like this, that you sort of said, well, this plan lays out what support I should be able to access, but I can't. Can you help me to do that? I think it's going to make a big difference to people's ability to access support, both by knowing that it's there and being able to frame the right conversations. I think it's a superb piece of work, and I look forward to seeing the difference it makes. So I would be really pleased to second this report. So Gwyn seconding it as well. So that's good. And Mark. So well, I don't have any urgent items now under part 1, and I don't have any urgent items under part 2 either. So I think I can once everything's switched off, I can call a meeting to a close, but also hope that everybody manages to get at least some break over the recess. But for us, I will probably see you regularly at cabinet meetings throughout the summer, but we'll be back formally